Hi, and welcome back to Military Law Talks. So today's video is about the Coast Guard vaccine mandate. So there is currently still a case pending regarding the COVID vaccine mandate. So you're probably thinking, that doesn't make any sense. That vaccine mandate was rescinded a long time ago. Why would there still be a case pending? Well, this case at the lower court, at the district court level, was actually dismissed for being moot. And what does moot mean? Moot means like, hey, this has already been settled. There's really nothing for the court to do. They can dismiss the case on those grounds that because the Constitution says that the judicial branch can only hear what's called cases and controversies if there's no longer a controversy, no longer something that the courts can remedy, then they can dismiss the case on those grounds. And originally, when the case was brought, it was brought while the vaccine was mandated. And then later, when it was rescinded, the government asked for the case to be dismissed. And it was dismissed at the district court level, but then the plaintiffs, the Coast Guard members who brought the lawsuit, filed an appeal to the federal appellate court, the Fifth Circuit in this case. And the appellate court recently decided, this is decided on March 20th, that, hey, you know what? We disagree with the district court. We don't think that this case is moot. And so it reversed the district court and sent it back down to have a hearing, have a trial, and redress the wrongs or the grievances that these plaintiffs have brought. And so let's take a look at that decision. Okay, so it's in the Fifth Circuit. And like I said, it came out on March 20th, 2025. So we had three plaintiffs in this lawsuit. They are all Coast Guard members who brought this lawsuit. And if you notice, the defendants, their names have all changed, right? Because now we have a new administration, and now the new administration are defending this lawsuit. And so I did a previous video on the DoD offering back to allow service members who were kicked out or either involuntary or voluntarily due to the COVID vaccine mandate. And remember in those videos, and I will link them below, that I specifically pointed out that nothing in what they were saying was that this vaccine mandate, not in the executive order, not in the DoD memorandums, they never once admitted that the original mandate was illegal. They just said, hey, it was wrong, and we definitely didn't do the right thing, and it was bad for us to like kick out all these service members based on this alone, but never once admitted that it was illegal. And that's important because that's what really this case turns on, whether that mandate was illegal or not. All right. And so the plaintiffs, right, they brought this lawsuit alleging that the Coast Guard violated their constitutional rights and statutory rights. And like I said, the policy has been rescinded, and the district court dismissed the lawsuit, that it was moot, ruling in favor of the Coast Guard, the government. Then the Fifth Circuit is disagreeing in this opinion and reversed and sent the case back. So this is just explaining the factual and procedural background. How did this case make it to the Fifth Circuit? So we have these three service members who were subject to the vaccine mandate. They submitted religious exemptions. So they asked for religious accommodations. We wanted to be exempted from the vaccine. Those accommodation requests were denied, and they still refused. Then they were later reprimanded, but allowed to continue to serve. So they were never separated. So that to this day, they still are serving in the Coast Guard. And so the court goes on to explain, what I explained earlier, how this case originated, what happened at the district court level. And so the court now is at the Fifth Circuit discussing, this legal standard to review the dismissal by the district court. It says, and it's quoting from a previous case, a case is moot only when it is impossible for a court to grant any effectual relief whatever to the prevailing party. And the majority opinion in this case is going to argue, there is a dissenting opinion, which we'll get to, but the majority opinion is saying that these parties still have some sort of interest, still something for the court to remedy. And so they're quoting from another case. They said, as long as the parties have a concrete interest, however small, in the outcome of the litigation, the case is not moot. And so this is where the court now applies that to the facts at it from this case. So they said that the Coast Guard, unlike the other DoD military branches, they not only they rescinded it, but didn't take any action to ensure that service members who refused the vaccine weren't treated differently than service members who did take it. So they discussed some other cases. So, for example, they discussed the Navy SEAL case that was later dismissed because it was moot. And this is a case I've discussed in previous videos. But to just review, it was Navy SEALs got together, challenged the COVID vaccine, and they sued the Navy. Later, the Navy rescinded the mandate, and then also it says, quote, promulgated additional policies that eliminated any remaining distinction between vaccinated and unvaccinated personnel. And so the court said, hey, because the Navy did this, they got rid of the policy, and they also put in place a policy saying you cannot discriminate for against service members who were unvaccinated. Then really this case is moot. There's really nothing else to decide, because there's really because of this policy, there's no difference between unvaccinated or vaccinated. And so the unvaccinated really had nothing that the courts could remedy or change. The court also discussed how the Coast Guard is different than the Navy in this respect. The Coast Guard canceled the mandatory vaccine, but didn't invoke any policy to ensure that unvaccinated Coast Guard members aren't treated differently. And so that's where this court is drawing a distinction between what happened in the Navy and in the Coast Guard. And they're going to use that to argue to say, hey, there is still something that could be decided by the courts. The courts could still step in and remedy this for these Coast Guard members. They also talked about the Air Force. So there was a previous case about the Air Force regarding the Air Force vaccine, and this one said that the Fifth Circuit, same court, said that we held this rescission did not moot the case because the Air Force had not made changes to its allegedly, quote, sham religious accommodation process for vaccines. And so that case they did not dismiss for being moot. And so they're saying that this is similar to that Air Force case. In this case, the plaintiffs have a sworn declaration from a retired Coast Guard vice admiral who explains that this vaccine rescission it didn't go far enough, that these service members may still face harm from refusing the vaccine. Because he says the Coast Guard is a small, tightly knit community, and reputation is really important, particularly for promotions. And he talks about how promotion boards will get together and discuss their personal knowledge of the service members who are up for promotion, and they could use that personal knowledge as a reason to deny promotion. And so the courts are saying, because, hey, this potential future harm of not getting promoted is something that the courts could remedy. They say that this case isn't mooted, and particularly this retired admiral says that something that the courts could do to remedy this situation is to affirmatively declare that the vaccine mandate was an unlawful order. So if the courts can affirmatively declare that could be something that could ensure that service members would not be discriminated against due to their refusals for the vaccine. And so the plaintiffs are arguing in this case that as long as the DoD and the Coast Guard in particular maintain that the vaccine mandate in the first place was a lawful order, they're going to be tainted by their refusal of that lawful order, even though they requested a religious accommodation. And so that decision point is, will the DoD, will the Coast Guard, or will it take the court stepping in to declare that vaccine mandate unlawful? And that's really important. And I'm going to do a later video on reinstatement of service members. I've done a couple previous videos, but actually the process that now some of the service branches have started releasing the paperwork that those service members would have to fill out in order to be reinstated. And one of them is essentially affirmatively saying, like, I disobeyed this lawful order. And it's not allowing those service members to come in with a clear conscience to say, no, 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 no. What I did was stand up to an illegal order, and then I was kicked out for that. And so um, I agree with a lot of the people who are pushing back against the DoD's reinstatement of service members, that they should admit that this was illegal. This was an illegal mandate. It illegally mandated emergency use authorization vaccine without proper informed consent. They didn't get the waiver. I've covered that in previous videos. And so that would be a big step. But now we're going to see, when this case is finally heard at the district court level, will the DoD, right? Because they are the plaintiffs in this case, the DoD, Christine Noem, who is in charge of the Coast Guard when they are not under the DoD, will they continue to argue to the courts that this was a legal, lawful order, or will they admit and agree with the plaintiffs that it was an illegal order in the first place, and then maybe withdraw their opposition to this case? So we'll see what happens. There is a dissent in this case that I did want to cover. So the dissent is arguing that, hey, this case is moot. It shouldn't be reversed and remanded. It says that plaintiffs no longer have a cognizable injury redressable by the courts, rendering their case moot. And he points out that there's 3 plaintiffs in this case, but there is no evidence that there's a personal stake in the outcome, because no one suffered. There's no evidence that any harm has come to any of these plaintiffs. And the talking about this future promotion process kind of is not a great argument, because specifically one of the plaintiffs has been already promoted. So one of the plaintiffs has been promoted, and another plaintiff has been recommended for promotion. And so the dissent in this case is saying that this case should be mooted and dismissed. Right. It is the minority decision. So the majority said this case should be reversed and remanded, and determined that the case wasn't moot. So we'll be watching this case, and I'll do another video later when there's a hearing at the district court level, and we'll see what happens there. So thanks for joining me in this video. If you like this video, please click the like button. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please consider doing so. I'm a new channel. Help spread the word. So share this video out there with other people that you think would enjoy this content, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.